The setting was formal, yet familiar. The sort of event where applause lines are both political punctuation and emotional validation. President Donald Trump, now in his second term as the 47th President of the United States, was addressing reporters and guests after a policy meeting that merged national security, urban order, and economic expansion into one sweeping narrative of national revival. He began not with global diplomacy, but with immigration, a subject that continues to define the sharp edges of his political persona. Looking across the room, he spoke of enforcement actions taking place in courthouses across the country, beginning in New York. ICE, he said, was finally being allowed to do its job. He described the operations with a kind of blunt satisfaction. Criminals are arresting criminals. Then, pausing only briefly, he added, "I'm happy about it. I want them to arrest criminals." For Trump, the argument was not just about border control, but about restoring order to the American interior. He used the nation's capital as a symbol of that restoration. If you take a look at D.C., he said, a year ago, D.C. was a very unsafe place. Our great capital was very unsafe. Some of you were mugged and talked openly about it. He gestured lightly toward the press section, invoking shared memory as evidence. Then, with the air of a man reciting a turnaround story, he declared, "Right now, D.C. is one of the safest places in the whole country." He tied that transformation to economic renewal. "The restaurants are booming," he said. "They're opening up new restaurants. The restaurants were all closing. Now you can't get into a restaurant." It was classic Trump rhythm, contrast, exaggeration, and repetition, all in service of the message that America's capital, once in decline, was thriving again under his hand. The president then explained how, in his telling, that transformation had been achieved. "It took 12 days for us," he said. "We sent in not politically correct military. We sent them in based on merit." The line drew a mix of laughter and applause, but he pressed on, connecting the idea of merit to a larger philosophy. He reminded the audience that, as he put it, the Supreme Court had recently affirmed the government's right to use merit-based criteria in a number of areas, a reference to his administration's victory in a case upholding certain selective hiring and university admission rules. "Everything now is based on merit," he said, repeating the phrase as if to rebrand the country around it. "Our country was founded on things based on merit." Then, with one of his signature pivots from the abstract to the anecdotal, he brought up professional golfer Keegan Bradley. "Keegan Bradley is not going to be playing golf if he wasn't a great player," he said. "If he shoots lower scores, there's no more merit system than that one." Keegan, right? If you miss a putt, they don't say, "Oh, that's okay, let's take it again," do they? No, it's based on merit. The crowd laughed, but Trump used the humor to reinforce the point. Everything's based on merit, and we're back to the merit system. From there, he shifted from philosophy to law enforcement. He said the military units sent into the capital were not chosen for politics, but performance. That military is all about merit, he said. They're big, strong people, and they're patriots too. The image was simple: disciplined strength restoring order to a city once lost to chaos. He then broadened the canvas. "You take a look at D.C. and now we're in Memphis," he said. "Memphis was really crime-ridden. It was terrible, a lot of people being killed." He described the intervention there as another quick success. "They say in 12 days, they can't even believe how much better it is." Then, projecting the future, he added, "It'll take probably a month over there. And we're heading to Chicago because we want to save Chicago." The next lines carried the unmistakable cadence of outrage. "Do you know they had over 4,000 people killed in Chicago over a short 4,000 people?" He shook his head. "And I have to watch this slob of a governor stand up and say that everything's okay, we've got it under control. They had 4,000 people murdered over a very short period of time." The claim drew gasps and scattered applause. He continued, "There's not a city in the world, I don't believe, that can claim anything like that. You hear so much about different places. I won't embarrass anybody by saying Mexico City or anywhere in Afghanistan, but there's no place like that." Then, in his signature fashion, he pivoted to direct ridicule of local officials. "I have to listen to the mayor who's got a 5% approval rate, maybe less. He's an incompetent man. And the governor is an incompetent guy. He's a guy that was thrown out of his family business like a dog. I know his family very well. And now he's a governor." He let the moment hang before driving the contrast home. He lost 4,000 people over a very short period of time. 6,000 or 7,000 people were shot but didn't die. And then he gets up and talks about how it's not a problem. He moved westward again, rhetorically, to Portland, Oregon. Every time I look at that place, the place is burning down, he said. There are fires all over the place. When a store owner, there are very few of them left, rebuilds a store, they build it out of plywood. They don't put up storefronts anymore. They just put wood up because they know it's going to be ripped down. He paused, then added with indignation, and then I hear how wonderful it is. It's not wonderful. It's a disaster. That's almost an insurrection, that place. The president described how federal personnel were dispatched to Portland as well. We put our people in there and they do the job, and they've really done the job. He returned again to the theme of speed and order. The beautiful thing is we've done it. 12 days we had this place safe, and now I would say within a month it was beautiful, and it continues to be. The anecdote folded back into his original argument that a merit-based federal force could restore what he called patriotism and safety to the country's most troubled cities. He summarized the larger arc by saying, "That was 3 months ago. I'll tell you, DC now is one of the hottest places, just like this country." He leaned forward slightly, voice lowering to the tone he often used for contrast. "We were a dead country," he said. "We were a dead country." Then, invoking global validation, he continued, "The King of Saudi Arabia said it. Others said it. The Emir of Qatar said it. The leader, great leader, UAE, all great leaders, they said effectively the same thing. 1 year ago, we had a dead country." He paused, then lifted his voice. "Now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world." The line drew applause again, and Trump transitioned seamlessly into an expression of gratitude. "I just want to thank everybody," he said, "and in particular thank AstraZeneca. What a great company you have. What a company you've built. You've been there a long time and done some job. It's an honor to have you." The president's praise of industry reflected one of his other recurring themes, that economic power, especially in high technology and manufacturing, was the backbone of national pride. He turned directly toward a man seated nearby and said, "I assume you're going to build..." So it's 4.5 billion for a plant. That's a pretty big plant, isn't it? Then, almost teasing, he added, "I was going to say, could he make it a little bit more?" The room laughed, and Trump used the moment to highlight America's investment boom. "We have a couple of them where they're going to spend 65 billion on one plant," he said. His tone shifted again, blending amusement with a touch of self-awareness. "You know, AI, all I know is it's based on information. I hope they're right about information. I don't know. You've got to make a lot of money There's got to be a lot of information out there." Then he ended the detour with confidence. "But that seems to be pretty hot. We're leading the world on information on AI, as you know, by a lot. It's not even close." The speech wound down as it had begun, with gratitude and assertion. "So we're doing a job," he said, "and I want to thank everybody, but in particular, Pascal, thank you very much. It's a great honor. Thank you." Then came the familiar closing cadence. "Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. You have a great..." "Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thank you." The applause carried him out of the frame. The remarks, though spontaneous in delivery, fit neatly within the larger messaging architecture of Trump's second-term presidency, one defined by a fusion of law and order, industrial resurgence, and global bravado. Each anecdote, from ICE arrests to booming restaurants, from Memphis crackdowns to AI factories, was meant to reinforce the same point, that America's revival, in his words, was built on strength, speed, and merit. Behind the applause, however, the implications were complex. Federal interventions in cities like Chicago and Portland had drawn sharp opposition from local officials and civil rights groups who argued that the administration was overstepping constitutional limits and militarizing domestic law enforcement. Critics warned that temporary safety gains could come at the cost of civic trust and civil liberty. For Trump, those arguments only confirmed his narrative. In his view, the opposition of weak politicians was proof that Washington's bureaucracy and local governments had grown complacent, paralyzed by politics and ideology. The president's vision was of a state re-energized, one that, in his words, sent in not politically correct military to restore order based on merit. That phrase, based on merit, threaded through the entire address. It was both slogan and philosophy, a shorthand for a return to measurable performance, to toughness, to what he presented as the original American ethos. He likened it to golf, to the straightforwardness of a missed putt, to the refusal to grant do-overs. It was not subtle, but it was unmistakably Trumpian, personal experience turned into public creed. The repetition of 12 days served a similar function. In each story, Washington, Memphis, Portland, the number became symbolic, an almost biblical measure of transformation. It suggested not bureaucracy, but immediacy, not committees and deliberations, but decisive command. Whether or not the facts supported those timelines was secondary. The point was emotional clarity. Things were bad, he acted, they got better. When he spoke of Chicago, the emotional pitch was higher still. The image of 4,000 murdered citizens condensed a decade of urban struggle into one compressed figure. Fact-checkers would later note that the number likely encompassed multiple years rather than months. But within the narrative of the speech, precision mattered less than impact. The message was stark. Democratic leadership equals decay, federal strength equals salvation. Even his references to foreign leaders, the King of Saudi Arabia, the Emir of Qatar, and leaders of the UAE, were less about diplomatic detail than about validation. By invoking external voices, Trump projected his familiar claim that the world respected strength and saw in his leadership a rebirth of American vitality. His segue into business investment served as an economic mirror to his law and order message. Where cities had been unsafe and dead, factories would now be vast and alive. A $4.5 billion plant, or even a $65 billion one, was to him a monument to the same principle of merit. Those who built, produced, and risked capital deserved reward. He tied artificial intelligence into that story, folding the language of technological supremacy into his broader case for American preeminence. We're leading the world on information on AI. It's not even close, he said with typical finality. For his supporters, the speech encapsulated what they admired most: directness, energy, and a sense of motion. For critics, it illustrated the president's tendency to conflate anecdote with policy and to substitute assertion for fact. But even they acknowledged his skill at weaving an emotional through line from the courtroom to the factory floor. By the time the president exited the stage, the applause had stretched into the corridors, a mix of genuine enthusiasm and the mechanical rhythm of political theatre. Staffers shook hands, cameras flashed, and aides gathered around the podium. Outside, the evening air of Washington carried a hint of autumn, the sound of sirens in the distance ironically punctuating a speech about safety. Later that night, as networks replayed excerpts, analysts dissected the familiar elements: the populist cadence, the nostalgic invocation of merit, the claim of a once-dead country now reborn as the hottest anywhere in the world. They compared crime data, past local reactions from Memphis and Chicago, and examined the latest filings on AI investments in Texas and Arizona. But for Trump, the details were beside the point. The purpose of the address was to create an impression that America, under his renewed presidency, was surging again, unashamedly forceful, unapologetically self-confident. It was, in his telling, a country finally unshackled from what he called politically correct hesitation. That duality, restoration and defiance, has become the hallmark of his leadership narrative. Whether speaking about immigration raids or artificial intelligence, the structure is the same: identify crisis, claim intervention, declare victory. It is the rhythm of a man who thrives on contrast, chaos and control, failure and redemption, decline and rebirth. His closing thanks to Pascal and the praise for AstraZeneca may have sounded like a corporate courtesy, but within the larger script, they completed a pattern. Each partner, each investor, each law enforcement officer became a character in a single story. The story of America made strong again by decisive leadership. When the applause faded and the cameras stopped rolling, the president's words lingered in the air, like the echo of a campaign rally disguised as a policy address. We were a dead country. Now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. It was the line that defined the day, boastful, imprecise, but unmistakably clear in intention. To his audience, it sounded like a promise fulfilled. To his critics, it was another act of political theatre. To Trump himself, it was evidence that the narrative still worked, that the same energy that carried him into office in 2016 and again in 2024 could still command a room, ignite applause, and turn a string of anecdotes into a story of national resurrection. And so the president left the stage the way he arrived, confident, combative, and convinced that in his America, the story always ends the same way, with victory declared, applause rising, and the promise that tomorrow, once again, will be better than today.